the worst NRL team ever. Now, you would have seen about a week or two ago, I put out a video, the best NRL team ever, where I went 1 to 13, fullback to lock, in each position, and named the best player I have ever seen in the NRL era, which is the era I grew up in. I was going to do the same concept for the worst NRL team ever, but gosh darn it, I just don't have the heart to put 13 players on the Gronk for being so crap. So what am I going to do instead? Well, I'm going to categorically look at the worst NRL team ever, the 2016 Newcastle Knights. Not much else to say, let's get into it. In 2016, NRL history was made when the Cronulla Sutherland Sharks won their first premiership after 49 years and 50 seasons in the competition. It was once thought that it would never happen. The great Jack Gibson, a former Cronulla Sharks coach, mind you, once said that waiting for the Sharks to win a premiership is like leaving the porch light on for Harold Holt, of course, former Australian Prime Minister, who once went out for a nice swim at sea and unfortunately never came back. Well, hypothetically, I guess, in this scenario, he did come back as Cronulla finally won a premiership. I recently interviewed Jesse Senolafeu, who was a part of that squad in that premiership winning year, and he gives an insight into how good that team was and the leadership roles of certain players. I've got to get that cheap plug in there, so if you haven't seen that interview yet, it's about a month ago with Jesse. He's a great bloke. I highly recommend you go back and watch it. However, there was another bit of history made, a bit of NRL history made in season 2016, and it wasn't that great, and that's what we're going to be focusing on today. The Newcastle Knights finished dead last on the ladder with 1 win and 1 draw, and they lost every other game. It's astonishing to really think about now, 6 years later, where they've made the finals the past 2 seasons. The side looks completely different, but we're going to have a look at that team today, and I guess just how bad they were. Although, looking at the side on paper, it's baffling to me that they were only able to win a game and draw a game. Sure, the team wasn't great, but on paper they're at least a bit better than that. But we're about to get into all of it. In fact, we're going to get into all of it now. This is the worst NRL team ever, the 2016 Newcastle Knights. So we'll go through Newcastle's full squad player by player in a little bit, but first I want to get a fair few stats out there just to sort of encapsulate Newcastle's season, sort of tidbits I've taken that sort of shape why they won 1 game and drew 1 and lost the rest in 2016. First of all, we'll start off with their draw. They drew the Canberra Raiders 24 all in round 3. The Canberra Raiders would go on to be 1 game away from the grand final and the preliminary final. Arguably 1 pass. Unfortunately, Edric Lee dropping the ball. If he'd caught it, he would have gone over the line and scored. Canberra would have beat Melbourne and they would have faced Cronulla in the grand final. Who knows what would have happened there. But, yeah, Newcastle drew with them. In round 3, Canberra was still finding their feet around then. At that point, they had not made the finals since, I believe, 2012, off the top of my head. So at that point, not exactly the biggest team to draw with, although Canberra would go on to have a very good season. The team that Newcastle would beat, a team that maybe you'd expect them to beat around that time, the West Tigers, 18 points to 16 in round 6. After that win in round 6, they would go on to lose their next 18 games in 2016, which was the rest of the season, and overall go on a 19-game losing streak, losing in round 1 of 2017 as well. They'll get their next win in round 2 of 2017 against the Gold Coast Titans. Don't want to talk about that too much. Their biggest home crowd of the year was 21,653 people. Of course, Newcastle generally each season are second behind the Broncos for biggest home attendance, and it is fitting because that 21,653 number was achieved in round 6 when they beat the Tigers. The biggest crowd overall that they would play in front of, funnily enough, actually came the next week when they went away to the Brisbane Broncos, the only team who has really beaten them consistently for the past few years in terms of home attendance, which is understandable. In round 7 of 2016, they would play the Broncos in front of 30,394 fans and would lose 53-0. So probably not the performance you want to put up in front of a huge crowd of that number. And in terms of the points they conceded 30 points on 13 occasions in 2016. They would concede 50 points on 3 occasions, one of those times obviously against the Brisbane Broncos in round 7 in front of that record crowd for Newcastle for the year. And their biggest loss would come against, funnily enough, the 2016 premiers, the Cronulla Sutherland Sharks, 62 points to nil in round 10, just 3 weeks after that big loss to Brisbane and 4 weeks after their only win of the year against the West Tigers. On paper, it makes sense. The premiers beating the team who finished last by that huge margin, and the biggest margin, the team who finished last was beaten by that year. They lost by 12 points on 7 occasions, so not even half. For a team that's won 1 game all season and drawn 1, to lose 7 games by 12 or less is a good effort. I guess you could say on paper a couple of those games could have gone either way. Their top try scorer for the season was Nathan Ross, the Ross Dog. We all love the Ross Dog. Unfortunately, lost the other night to Justin Hodges in a boxing match. But he only scored 9 tries. And look, let's be honest, for a decent club in a season who's having a decent year, your top try scorer at least gets double digits. Great effort from the Ross Dog. 9 tries in the year. But you want your top try scorer for a season to be scoring a bit more than that, don't you? Nathan Brown, this was his first season as head coach of the Newcastle Knights. Their season wasn't necessarily an indictment on him, but the team that I believe Rick Stone left behind to him. And he would, of course, go on to recruit the likes of Kalen Ponga, Mitchell Pearce, etc. So I think his legacy at Newcastle was not defined by that first season. He just inherited a squad that happened to only win 1 game and draw 1 in the first season he was there, and that might have contributed to it, a new coach as well. And finally, it was Trent Hodkinson's first season, and I've honed in on him because for the 2 years before he was playing finals at the Bulldogs. In 2014, he was the grand final losing captain despite being a filling captain for the suspended Michael Ennis. And in 2014, he literally won New South Wales' first State of Origin series in 9 years. What do I mean by that? Well, he scored the try and kicked the goal that won New South Wales the series in Game 2 2014 when they beat Queensland 6-4. That was Trent Hodkinson. So he went from that to, unfortunately, winning 1 game and drawing a game in a season. He took a big risk by going to Newcastle in 2016, and unfortunately his NRL career was not able to recover after that. He would then go on to a stint at Manly before retiring. Now it's time to get onto Newcastle's squad for 2016, and I'll be honest, it's a big squad. I've gone the whole 30-man squad, I think it is, so I'll say a little piece on each player, I guess, but I do not want this video going too long, so I'll try to keep it brief. We'll kick things off with Todd Lowry, who unfortunately retired in the pre-season. Cade Snowden, who unfortunately retired in the mid-season. We are talking about 2 players here who had substantial NRL careers. Sad to see it sort of end that way, and they didn't get a full season to end their careers there, Todd Lowry and Cade Snowden. Jared Mullen, the 5'8", we know what's happened with him. Good on him though, sort of reviving his career on the Sunshine Coast, and despite being, I think it's 35, he is holding out hope that he will one day play in the NRL again. His time is limited, but who knows. Akilia Iwate, of his generation, of his era at Newcastle, probably a couple of years before, one of the greatest, if not the greatest winger of his generation. It's him or Brett Morris in terms of try scoring acumen. Bit weird to see him in this squad that only won one game and drew a game in a year. And I'm not sure, he must have been injured or suspended for a bit during the year, because you'd think he'd be that top try scorer for Newcastle and score at least 10 tries. Peter Mataudi as well has since gone on to Super League and has had a decent career there. Really nice guy as well, Peter Mataudi. I believe though it was Sione who made his debut for Australia, the youngest debutant for Australia ever. I believe, was it that year? It wasn't the 2017 World Cup. I think it was 2016 in a Four Nations tournament where he made his Australia debut. Chris Adams as well, mid-season loss, would end up leaving the club. I don't know too much about Chris Adams, unfortunately. Dane Gagai, who was sort of the man for Newcastle during this period, obviously does his best work at either centre or on the wing. He played fullback for most of this season and was still Newcastle's best player. He's returning there in 2022. Going to be interesting to see how he goes. He definitely won't be playing fullback with Kalen Ponga there, but it's just interesting to see that role they used him in 2016. Robbie Rocco as well, sort of a solid NRL player there, was very young at the time coming through. Jeremy Smith, co-captain, goal kicker for Newcastle that season. I believe that was his last year. Corbin Sims has since gone on to other clubs and is now currently at Hull KR in Super League. A good player as well, at his best, one of the better forwards in the NRL. Jake Mayamo gone on to have a solid career in Super League. I believe currently at Warrington, was at the Huddersfield Giants, or maybe I've got that switched. Pre-season loss, Joseph Tarpany, who went to Canberra, New Zealand international. Newcastle could have probably done with holding on to him in the 2016 season. Chanel Mataudi as well. I don't know what he's doing these days. I'm not sure if he's still playing off the top of my head. Sione Mataudi, also now in Super League, and the youngest debutant for Australia ever, I believe it was in 2016. Tyler Randall, haven't heard of for a bit. I think he might have retired by now. Hooker was sort of a promising hooker back in that day, I believe. Jack Stockwell went on to play for the Titans. I'm not too sure. He's not still there as a Titans fan, otherwise I'd know. I think he might be in Super League now, I'm not sure. This is all just off the top of my head. Tarek Sims, another captain during the year, made a mid-season move, I believe, to... Was it to the Dragons? Or was it to the Broncos? This is something I probably should have looked at before, but honestly, guys, this is such a long squad. I'm just going my thoughts as I go through each player. Sam Mataora, I believe, ended up in Super League. Decent little NRL career there. Danny Levi currently playing in the Host Plus Cup, which is the Queensland Cup, formerly Intrust Super Cup. Lachlan Fitzgibbon still at the club. Nathan Ross retired. The Ross dog, we all love him. David Barner, I believe, also playing in the Host Plus Cup now. Not too sure, but David Barner is not a name I've heard of for a little bit. Jalen Feeney had a bit of hype around him for a little bit. Not too sure off the top of my head what he's doing now. Maybe Super League, maybe Queensland Cup as well. Trent Hodkinson, captain, spoke about him before. Unfortunately retired. Pat Mataudi. I forgot there was a fourth Mataudi brother. I must apologise. I'm not too sure what Pat's up to these days. Paulie, currently in Super League. I think probably went to Super League a bit too early. I know he's made a nice career for himself over there now, but he went there when he was like 22, and I think it was coming off a decent season. Was it? Who was he playing for? He wasn't at Newcastle. Was he at Canberra or Parramatta? Jumps out at me. One of those two, I think. but he's in Super League now and doing well for himself, I think. Daniel Safidi, arguably Newcastle's best player now. It's great to see him evolve, still at the club, obviously. Jacob Safidi, I think he got Player of the Year at Newcastle this year, showed that he's just as good as his brother. His brother, who is a New South Wales representative, Jacob Safidi, could be there next year. Or this year, sorry. Going to peel back the curtain here. This is being recorded in 2021. Corey Dennis, haven't heard of him in a little while. A little bit of hype around him at the time too. A winger. Mickey Payer, I think would be retired by now. Sort of in and out, a bit of a journeyman in the NRL. Will Pearsall, I must apologise, I've not heard about too much. Josh King, still at the club. Brock Lamb, over in Super League now, I believe. Jack Cogger, playing for Huddersfield in Super League, taking after his dad, who was actually considered a club legend at Huddersfield. So it was nice to see Jack in that sense following his dad's footsteps. I believe his dad's name's John. Mitch Barnett, a great player for Newcastle, a workhorse, had a bit of a down period in 2021, but someone who I think largely throughout his career has gone underrated. Brendan Elliott went on to have a great season at Manly in 2019 as their fill-in fullback for Tom Trbojevic. Obviously, I don't think as good a fullback as Trbojevic, but filled the hole nicely. Currently, now I believe in the Championship, the second tier, with the Lee Centurions. Dylan Fithen, I've not heard of for a fair bit too. Another guy, a hooker, who had a bit of hype around him. I think he's probably playing in the lower grades now. And now we're sort of getting to the more unknown extended squad players. And I don't think I've heard of many of these guys, but I'm going to give them a shout out nonetheless. Bryce Donovan, Chris Freeman, Tama Kupu, Brady Smith, James Taylor, who was a mid-season loss, Takina Valia, sorry if I botched that, Luke Yates, who I have heard of, Iwiti Baker, Braden Robson, and Ken Toffelau. How can we really sum up this Newcastle Knights season? On paper, at least that squad, I thought would win at least 3 games. They're probably around... not as good as the Brisbane side of 2020. No, it's hard to say. You'd think they'd win at least 3 games, right? Like the Bulldogs side this year, like the Broncos, last year, like the Broncos of 2020. This team on paper did not live up to how good they should have been, even if it wasn't that good. But they would obviously go on to build on that under Nathan Brown in 2017, especially 2018, and they've now made back-to-back final series. Anyway, other than that, I've been Oliver from Rugby League in My Opinion. Please like this video, share it around with your mates, comment your thoughts on the 2016 worst team ever in the Newcastle Knights of that year, and please subscribe to the channel. I'll see you next time.